You're listening to News Talk Saga 960. Also streaming live on saga960am.ca.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Right now. Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is a show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. It is good to be back in the studio, as last week's show was pre-recorded, but I'm super excited as we have a pretty insightful show lined up for you this evening, or early or late afternoon, depending on what you want to call it. I'm going to be joined by two amazing individuals. They are the co-founders of a wonderful collective called Didihood, which is all about promoting South Asian female creatives, mainly within the media world. And I got my good friends Arti Patel and Nikki Gill here live in studio. And I thought it'd be great to chat with them, not only about what Didihood is, but with all of the commotion that's taken place over the last week and a half pertaining to our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the quotations brownface / blackface photos and videos that have been popping up. There's been a lot of discussion regarding how this is being covered, mainly from an ethics standpoint. There's been a lot of articles that have been posted online regarding representation in newsrooms and whether it actually exists, and a little bit of slander when it comes to the way that this story has been handled and how there really hasn't been a POC point of view. So I'm going to get their perspectives on that as well. We're going to be talking about two other newsworthy stories. One is the fact that Mattel, the toy maker, has come out with gender neutral dolls. Now, if you know Mattel, they are the maker and creator of Barbie, which is a really huge dynasty, but they announced this week that they were going to come out with gender neutral dolls that allow the user, the child, to choose which gender they want reflected with the doll itself. So wanted to get their perspectives on that and how they feel about toys sort of venturing into this territory, and whether it's appropriate and whether it actually makes sense, or whether it's something that, you know, parents need to really think about when it comes to putting them in front of their children. And then we're also going to have a little fun and talk about the Super Bowl halftime show announcement. It was announced that Shakira and J-Lo are playing the halftime show. Quite interesting, considering that the NFL did do a deal with Rock Nation and Jay-Z. Personally, I thought the halftime show would have been Jay this year, selfishly, because I'm a Jay-Z fan, but I'm not going to complain about Shakira and J-Lo, and I thought it'd be great to get Arti and Nikki's opinion on that, and just the direction that the NFL has been going over the last few months when it comes to being more relevant. And then after all of that, I'm going to be joined later in the show by another good friend. His name is Andrew McRae, but he is known sort of in the local professional wrestling realm as Freedom Wallace. And he has two shows coming up, one with Battle Arts Academy located in Mississauga, which is called the Battle Arts Rising Stars Show, which actually promotes and puts a spotlight on some of the local wrestlers that train out of that facility. And then he also has another show next week taking place in the Junction in Toronto, where it's a brewery wrestling show. So it mixes both pro wrestling and beer in one atmosphere. I'll have to ask him what he has lined up from a safety standpoint, because that sounds like quite the mix. But we'll definitely get into that a little later here on New Theory Radio. But before we continue, we are going to take another commercial break. And then when we come back, I'm going to be joined by Nikki and Arti, and we are going to get things started here on News Talk Saga 960. And we are back here on New Theory Radio on News Talk Saga 960 AM. Again, my name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is a show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life as I log back into my laptop to make sure I got all my notes. Again, I'm super excited to kick things off here on New Theory Radio with actually a group that I've been quite interested in over the last year that you guys have been in existence. I thought it was a pretty cool collective that got started, and I'm so happy to finally have them in studio. This, to me, is my most anticipated episode because I think I've been chasing down Arti to get you guys on the show for like the longest time. But I'm happy you finally made it happen. It is Arti Patel as well as Nikki Gill, both co-founders of Didihood. a creative collective of South Asian media professionals, female media professionals. I think I butchered that, didn't I?
No, you're right on it. It's the Sisterhood for creatives. It's art, focus, fashion, film, but a lot of media for sure.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because number one, it's definitely covers off something that's very much needed in this industry, I find, especially when it comes to the media side of things, and which also flows into the other forms of entertainment like film and music and television, just around representation and just around the treatment that females get in these industries and just how harsh it can actually be, specifically on social media. So I love this sisterhood that you guys have created. How did this start?
Well, the idea of representation was something that actually kicked it off, right? Because we would talk so much about being in the industry or trying to get into the industry and wanting to see more faces that look like us, and decided you can complain about it and you can say that this is a problem, a systemic problem, and everything that is true. But the best way to make change is to create the change yourself. So if we can create a space to help encourage younger Didis who are looking to get into these industries and likely don't have somebody who's a journalist or an actor or a writer or anything like that in their family, so don't have anybody to kind of take their hand and be like, yes, this is a career. Yes, let me show you how. Yes, let me mentor you. Let me give you contacts in the industry, those types of things. Then it's so much harder. They have to go over all of those obstacles themselves. And that's something we definitely did. We had those obstacles. There is nobody else in my family who is a journalist before me. I see the change now with some of my younger cousins, that it's something that they want to get into. And I'm so happy to be there to guide them through that.
Excellent.
But that wasn't there for me.
Yeah. Because I remember growing up, like the only representation that I ever saw, like outside of seeing South Asian shows like Iron Asia on CTV. But when it came to mainstream outlets, like you'd look at CTV and Much Music with Monica Deal. And then I remember, do you guys remember YTV, like Vijay Ashna? Like those were like the two that, even like I remember every time they would show up on TV, like my parents would be so proud. Like, oh, there's like someone like us. But they were the only two that stood out amongst the entire media landscape or TV landscape within Canada, I found. And now when you turn on CB24, you turn on Global News, even when you look at publications like Vice or Global or other types of publications, there's so much of it, which I think is phenomenal, which I think is great. Yeah. Is that it?
I mean, it's a long time coming, right? I feel like, especially working in the industry now for the last 8 years.
8 years,
yeah,
really?
8 years. You see it grow, you see it change. I mean, we obviously know there's still issues, a lot of issues in mainstream media. But I think the nice thing now, and maybe it's just because of social media, and maybe it's that movement on social media, and I can even see it in Didihood, we're a lot more willing to help each other.
Yeah.
When I think maybe 10, 20 years ago, we were sort of in this journalism world where it's very competitive. Even when Nikki and I were in school, we're all friends and everything, but at the end of the day, only some of us will end up actually working in the media. And that's the reality, right? Even the grads in our year, very few of us actually ended up with full-time journalism jobs. And the ones who did, myself included, it was a hustle to get there.
Totally.
So I think the odds are kind of always stacked against you. And then when I think about coming from a South Asian perspective, like I am also the only journalist in my family, didn't even think this was a job I could ever do, because how do you even explain to your parents you want to be a journalist?
Well, that's a good point you bring up. Like, how did you both go about telling your parents? Like, I'm assuming based on the successes that both of you have seen that they're definitely they were supportive, but it's an interesting conversation to have, because I remember being obsessed with drama back in high school and telling my dad, oh, I think I want to be a director or an actor. And he was very supportive of it, but he also told me, he's like, hey, you may want to just go to school for something that's going to allow you to have a backup, which is why I went into business. But how did you handle those conversations?
Yeah, my dad was definitely a realist about it. My mom is a creative. She ran a drapery business for a decade.
Sick, nice.
I'm the daughter who aired on her side of the family, whereas my sisters were very much so.
Yeah.
Their engineer father's daughter, went into business and all of those kinds of things, very logical careers that they could get on board with. And I told my dad, I must have been 12 or 13 at the time, and I was like, I want to be a journalist. And it was something that an elementary school teacher had said to me. She was just like, this is something you should consider.
Sick,
your
nice.
writing kind of goes in this vein. And I got really interested in it, did a ton of research, and just kind of thought out my career path and how I wanted to get there. And my dad was like, I don't think you should do this. You're not going to make any money. I don't think this is like a logical career. And I'm always careful to note when we talk about this with Didihood is it's not our parents' fault. It's not like they weren't supportive. They had a set of careers that they knew worked, that they were familiar with on what the career path looks like and how you can be successful. And that is every parent's dream at the end of the day. They just want their kids to be equipped with those skills. So when you throw something at them like journalism, they're just like, I don't know if you're going to be successful. And that's so terrifying to them that you might not be able to make as much money to carry your household and take care of your family and things like that. So my dad said to me, if you get a job, if you do something that proves to me that you want to do this, then I'm on board. So I actually did a summer co-op placement after grade 10. So I was 16. And I was at the Mississauga News for like 6 weeks of my summer break, and I was like a junior reporter.
That's awesome.
And I came home after that and was like, okay, Dad, I loved it. And that's when he was like, okay, I'm on board. You did what I asked you to do. You proved it to me. So now I'm going to be behind you, and we're going to do this. You're going to apply to journalism schools, and you're going to go that route.
I'm so happy Nikki, that you talked about just the perspective that South Asian parents have originally when we are growing up, and especially at that time, because I think we're all within the same age bracket. I'm 31. I'm assuming you guys are hopefully in the same age bracket.
Yeah,
if not younger. So it's because, to your point, like, I don't think our parents really knew what was out there, and I think they were always told, like, to be successful in Canada, you have to become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Even I remember just the idea of entrepreneurship was something that was like, you sure you want to do that? Like, it's kind of risky. And there's always other undertones that exist when it comes to being a person of color and trying to start your own business and sort of dealing with some of the challenges that exist with that as well. But no, I think it's great that you were able to take your father along in that journey, because I find that once you're able to show and prove, there is a bit of leveling that takes place.
Yeah, and they definitely, and now they're all over it. They love every single thing that I do with it. And then again, because I did it, to have any of our younger cousins or anybody else that they even come across whose kid is thinking about doing something similar, they are now that support system for those parents too, being like, nope, like Nikki did it. This is how you're going to do it. It's definitely a viable career.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's bound to happen even to us when we're all raising our kids.
Totally.
Like, a huge percentage of the jobs that our kids are going to be doing in 30 years don't exist right now. So we're not going to know anything about them.
Arti, how was your journey with your parents?
For me, I've always loved writing since I was a kid. I used to write. I didn't think that was a job. I just thought that was something that was a hobby that people did. When I was maybe in grade 7, 8, I think I had more interest in like the school newsletter or the school paper. So I kind of, dipped my toes in there. But again, never talked about it to my parents. I don't even think we ever had the career conversation. I just knew that I wanted to go into something in science or business. Like, I thought those are just my options. My parents, again, from perspective wise, they both had labor jobs. They came to Canada. They didn't really know anybody else in any other industry. And then a lot of my family, a lot of my cousins are also engineers. So from that perspective, I always felt that pressure that, I had to get good grades, had to do well. And I did. That wasn't the issue. I just didn't know what I really wanted to do. And I didn't think I knew fully until maybe high school when, I had a neighborhood friend. I was 13 years old, and a girl in my neighborhood passed away. She was murdered. It was a big Toronto story. And that was the first time I actually saw a journalist, like, not only knocking on my door in my face, but just I saw the news unfold of how it was covered.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that it was a horrible thing that had happened, but it made me question a lot of things. Like, why is she being described this way? Why are we talking about her family this way? Like, all these questions just started coming up to me. So it followed me for a few years. I went to high school. I had a great teacher in grade 10 who really then kind of shaped me into who I am today. And she's explained to me, like, if you love writing, think about journalism, think about reporting. And I'm like, I'm never going to be on TV. Like, I'm never going to go on the radio. Like, I'm not going to go write for the Toronto Star. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
She's like, why not? Like, why can't you do this? So, she helped me with the application process. I also applied to a bunch of business schools just in case, I had a backup. And then I went to my parents. I actually went through my cousins first because I'm like, I need more support on my side. And I explained to my cousin, at this point I had already got into Ryerson.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this program's really small.
Was it RTA?
It's journalism.
Oh, yeah, nice.
But the program is really small. It's hard to get into. And I got in. I need to convince my parents to let me do this. And my parents have always been super supportive of me. I don't think they've ever said no to me. You know, I grew up downtown. I've had a very different life, I think, than a lot of my friends. But when I brought this up, they were a little bit hesitant because they just didn't get it.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean? Like, where do you think you're going to work? And I'm like, I think I'm going to work at the Toronto Star, or I think I'm going to work at the CBC. And they know all these names. They know CP24. They know Global News. And they were just like, okay, but just make sure that you can get a job. Because if you can't get a job, that's a lot of money that we're now, you know, paying for.
Totally.
So I kind of went with it. It was a bit of a risk. I was like, okay. And then a few months before I started, I had a family member come up to me and ask me where I was going. And I said, oh, I'm going to Ryerson. I'm going to journalism school. And she's like, why would you do that? And this is like literally a month before I started Ryerson in September. And then I'm like, I think I'm good at it. I think I can get better at it. And I think this is what I want to do. And she's like, well, you'll only end up working for a South Asian news publication. And she's like, do you really want to work on Omni TV one day? And that's it. Like, that's what you have for yourself. And I was so thrown back, but it actually just pumped me up even more. And I'm like, I got to prove to this lady that I'm going to work at a newsroom, because why would I be the only South Asian reporter just because I'm South Asian?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to work somewhere else. So took it with me. It did hurt, but here I am today.
Awesome. No, I'm glad to use that negative feedback as like positive reinforcement.
Yeah, and that's another thing with South Asian women. I think for myself, you don't really get taught about self-esteem and confidence, I think, as much as you should. So when someone tells you that could have just like ended my, journey right then and there. But
well, especially, and I find it interesting that that's what really drove you to go all in. And now fast forward 8-9 years later, you and Nikki and who's the Ruhi, and out in Vancouver. Shouts to Ruhi. Hopefully she listens to this. Have now started this collective to almost reverse some of that feedback that exists, because I always found, like, I still remember when I was doing like local Rogers TV, and I would work my marketing day job during the day and then go volunteer at night and be on TV. And remember once I was having a conversation with my dad, and he's like, oh, like, are you doing too much? Like, are you spreading yourself too thin? Like, is the volunteering like even worth it? And I was telling him, like, no, I do like it. Like, it's a good little hobby. And then it wasn't until like the municipal election happened and one of the city councilors came knocking on my door. I wasn't home, but then they saw my dad, and I think he wrote his name somewhere. It's like, oh, is your son Nav, like, on Rogers? And all of a sudden it provided like validation, like, oh, okay. So now my dad's always like encouraging me to go all in, and he's always telling me, he's like, oh, you should be like on a major network, or you should go like try this, try that. But I found that like it wasn't until that first part of recognition showed up that he started to be like, okay, cool, this is kind of neat. Like, did you guys have that as well? Like, was it something that, like, it sounds like the Mississauga News experience for you, Nikki, was one that kind of validated you, but Arti, I guess once you made it to global, was that sort of reassurance amongst your parents, like, oh, she's onto something?
So I guess when I started working, I started my career interning at HuffPost Canada.
Oh, yes.
At that time, my parents, they had no idea what that was. They're like, what is this? What do you mean it's only on the internet? I remember going to like family events. I actually went to India that year, and all these people were asking me what I was doing, and I was like, a newspaper on the internet. Like, I don't even know how to explain it.
But there was a HuffPost India too, right?
Not at that time.
Oh, okay.
Not at that time. But even to my parents, like, they still, like, they don't use the internet. They don't use the computer. I'm like, they're not going to even be able to read my stories. They don't get it. So at one point, I had printed out something.
Wow.
And I brought it to them.
Good for you.
And I was like, look, Mom, this is what I do every day. And then she's like, oh, okay. And then they finally started, like, understanding it. And it's funny because years after, because I was at HuffPost for almost 6 years.
Yeah.
When I was there, they used to tell people all the time, they're like, yeah, my daughter's a journalist for the internet. Like, the internet is
the biggest media company of all time.
Like, my daughter's a journalist for the internet. And then when I got to Global News, that's when that finally kind of hit them, like, whoa, because everybody knows Global News is a TV station. But I think at one point they thought I was on TV, because I still work for Global News online.
Yes.
So,
but you have been on TV a couple times.
Yes, I have been on TV one time. My dad was really excited that day. He called every single person that he knew.
It was like a viewing party?
I had the tax guy who does our taxes call me, and he's like, I heard you were on TV. And I was like, who told you this? But it's great. Like, it's great to see they know about Didihood. It's kind of nice to see my young cousins now, really into journalism. They share my articles. I have a lot of friends who are really into, who are not in the media, who are really
awesome.
into it. So it's been fun. It's been fun to sort of kind of lead that way in this career.
Yeah.
And sort of the whole point of Didihood now is to sort of teach young people the kind of mistakes that we took, right?
Yeah.
And the steps that we took to get here, because the only thing that we want to do is now encourage more South Asian women in the space. And that's the goal, right? Because now we're in the industry, we see it. It's not diverse. How do we get it more diverse? It has to start from the education standpoint.
It's also like what I love about Didihood, and we'll be the last thing that we talk about, because I do want to get both your perspectives on some of the news items. But the fact that both of you, along with your partner in Vancouver, have decided to create this network. Nikki, we were talking briefly off air about how everyone's sort of going freelance nowadays. So to really get a story out there, to really get an opportunity, you have to leverage your network more than ever nowadays. Was that a catalyst as well? Like, outside of the coaching and the mentoring, was it really around, hey, we need to all band together and support each other so that when opportunities arise, we know who to leverage, or we know who we can count on to really allow our work to seep through?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that was a major catalyst for us was, especially in the media industry, there's a small group of South Asian women. We all basically know each other, but mostly via Twitter or Instagram. We all followed each other, and we all would get invited to the same media events, and Arti would go and I would go for our respective companies, and then we would be there and we would see these girls, and we know of them. You might have had a Twitter back and forth a few times, but we didn't really ever go up to them and start conversations. Like, it just felt like there was a bit of that scary thing, like maybe she has no idea who I am, maybe she doesn't care to talk to me.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get over that. So Arti had put out a tweet and just said that Ruhi, myself, and her were thinking about doing something, like creating something like a collective for South Asian women in creative industries, like who's in. And the feedback was insane. And all of these women reached out and said, definitely, I would love a space like this. And that was a huge catalyst for us. And then now it's completely different when we go to those events. Like, we run into people who we know through Didihood or have met at Didihood events. And I have friends who aren't South Asian who have come to events who have started new jobs being like, oh, I just met this girl. She's on my team. I remember her from this Didihood event. And it's just really created a community where you don't feel that like obstacle to go start that conversation. And we've seen people get jobs at other people's companies.
That's
and
sick.
Get freelance contracts. And we've seen the little connections happen between all of these people that we really have nothing to do. We created a space and they came into it and built their own network and their own connections there. So we're not taking credit for it in any way. Like, they just come in and they are building it. And that was the dream, to just have these women have a way to connect with each other and to help each other in the industry, because there really aren't that many of us. And it is a little bit sad that we know so many of them from all of the different publications and stations. I wish there were so many that we didn't know all of them. But we're getting there. That's part of the process, right? Part of it is to build this space to encourage more people to get in, because the more of us that are there, the more of us that will fill the positions and eventually get into those decision-making roles too.
Excellent. Let's get right into some of the topics. I'm just going to ask both of you straight up. Are you tired of Brownface?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I remember seeing one of your tweets about, I think when the story dropped, you're like, don't ask me about it tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Like, I did LOL at that. I'm not going to lie. So it's no secret. Actually, funny enough, the show I did last week, I pre-recorded the day that the Justin Trudeau story dropped. So, and we were talking culture representation in entertainment, because Lily Singh's show had premiered. And it's amazing what a week and a half can do in both instances. But anyways, we won't get into that. But it was the story, like, literally I got a message about a leaked photo of Justin Trudeau in blackface is making its rounds, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But a week and a half removed, one of the things that I did want to talk to both of you about was really around the coverage around this story. It's no secret that it was blowing up everywhere. Even when I was in Paris this past week, like, I did see it pop up on the BBC quite a bit. But the recurring thing that I noticed was that there weren't a lot of POC individuals covering this story. Like, we weren't getting too many different perspectives, and I thought Maclean's did a fantastic job earlier last week. They came out with an article called The Outliers of Canadian Media, and they pretty much talked about, it was Christina Gonzalez who wrote it, where she pretty much talked about how, with this story, the key thing that was probably the most evident outside of it being an incident was the fact that there aren't enough people of color within the journalism world or within newsrooms. And there's a lot of people that she speaks to. Like Manisha Krishnan, who was on Vice. I think she still is on Vice, as well as a couple of other individuals that I'm sure both of you are very familiar with. But that was the one thing I felt was missing throughout all of this coverage, was you weren't getting the perspective of somebody who was actually hurt by what the Prime Minister at the time had done. And I'd love to get both your perspectives on that, on how you would have changed that. And being in a position that the both of you are in, where you can't choose a side, do you feel like there was an opportunity for some of these big networks to really get behind some of their minority journalists to really sort of not speak out, but to provide a different perspective on what was going on? And maybe, Arti, we'll begin with you.
Sure. I think for me, I found out the news. I was at a dinner. I had my phone off, and then when I turned it on, I had about 80 messages and group chats.
I thought maybe the photo just right on your phone. No,
can you imagine? Group chats from friends and family members. I'm like, what on earth is happening? Mm-hmm. And pulled up a photo from the Time magazine picture, and there you go. It's our Prime Minister in a horrible brown face, wearing an Aladdin costume, in a party 18 years ago. So the first thought I had was, oh dear God, tomorrow at work's going to suck. And I think I even texted Nikki, because I had this feeling that someone's going to ask me to talk about this.
Oh, for sure.
And
it's always the de facto too. It's like, hey, you're South Asian. You got an opinion on this.
And then I went to work the next day, and I did tweet. I'm like, I hope nobody talks to me tomorrow and asks me what I think about brownface, because I knew this was the story that we would be talking about for the whole week. We're in an election. This is a big scandal. This is very juicy. Mm. It's on time.
Yeah.
Everyone's freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. So I go to work. I don't remember at work anyone really coming. We talked about it, of course. It's obviously current day events. We talked about it. Nobody ever asked me, pressured me specifically because I am South Asian. But when we were talking about coverage, I almost, for a minute, removed myself from it. I don't work in politics. I am not a politics reporter. I don't know what this implies. I mean, I know what this means for Trudeau's campaign just as a citizen, but I can't analyze for you exactly what this means as an outcome in politics and history in Canada. But I'm a brown person. What I can say is how this can make a brown person feel, or how they felt, or I talked to a lot of brown people who weren't even offended by this.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of conversations around this specific topic. But I think the issue with coverage on this one is that people either go to the brown reporter in the newsroom and ask them for their opinion because they're brown, and that to me is the number one no, right?
Yeah.
Because you weren't interested in what I had to say about politics ever, but now we're using me because, not to say that this happened for me, but I'm sure it happened for other people in newsrooms.
No, for sure.
But you're using me now because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
So now you want my opinion, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think the story, as juicy and scandalous as it is, I think because it was covered by majority white media, I think we missed the point of it, right? We're missing the point of, and this is what the McLean's piece talked about, is that the issue behind this is race. And just a few days ago, I think before this happened, there was a CTV story that I had read about how some Canadians, some poll, were uncomfortable with Jagmeet Singh wearing a turban. Yeah. Okay? That to me freaks me out.
Yeah.
I live in a country and people are scared of turbans. And we know this. We know that racism exists. But for one whole week, we're going to go into a deep dive of brownface and figure out where he was and find his classmates and, go to the costume I'm sure. And we're trying to get so deep in this investigative report of the story.
Try to get other film, other photos,
and
everything.
even at our publication, we had the blackface video, the second one or the third one.
Okay.
So there's a ton of content being thrown around. And at the end of the day, I'm like, what is the issue here? We're not actually talking to the community aspect of it. We're all freaked out because our Prime Minister is doing this, but nobody's actually talking about racism. Mm-hmm. Nobody is talking about this. And that's why the few reporters who even did cover it, I know one of the best pieces I wrote was in the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. It's not even in Canadian media.
Yeah, I know.
So we all got a reality check that newsrooms are not diverse, and this has been an issue that's been happening all the time. But I think the bigger thing that we miss is that we still did not cover the issue of racism.
No, we didn't.
We didn't. And I'm sure newsrooms are still having these conversations.
That Jagmeet Singh article that you mentioned, I read that one as well. I think CTV was the one that posted that.
Yeah.
And again, as soon as this brownface scandal occurred, that one article just got swept under the rug. Mm-hmm. And it was a fascinating read because, again, when you look at Canada and as Canadians, we sort of sometimes live in a bubble being like, hey, we're not like our friends down south. We're completely different. We embrace culture. We embrace, ethnicities. We're just very forward thinking. But then when you see an article like that, it kind of makes you second guess, especially when you start to see racist things taking place in campaigns in Calgary and just even some of the comments that are being made by some of the parties that are running as well. But it's a shame. It's such a shame that a very interesting fact that apparently some Canadians are uncomfortable with the potential Sikh prime minister, that was totally overshadowed by a brownface incident, which also has its merits, but again, it's just that other Jagmeet Singh article is no longer in the question anymore.
And I think with this story too, when we talk about brownface and blackface, is not the same thing at all. And I think blackface has so much more.
Oh yeah,
the history behind it and why people did this, and even that conversation, we just really didn't talk about. And at work, I know we did this whole production around like the history of blackface even in Canada, which I don't think a lot of people even know about.
I had no idea.
Until I even looked at the piece.
Yeah.
So I think when we're having these conversations, it's easy to pick it up, pinpoint who of color is in the space and get them to give you your opinion. But I think as decision makers and newsmakers, we should look at a bigger story, like how is this actually affecting Canadians,
exactly.
Right? And I don't know. I don't think this story is going away anytime soon.
I don't think so either. Nikki, what do you think?
Yeah, so I also had the initial dread, had sent Arti the text message. We were chatting about it just because, and I have a different, the way my job works is completely different. It's a monthly magazine and we do a lot of local coverage. Yeah. So brownface drops and my work day the next day doesn't change that much. We're going to chat about it as a news team. Yeah. But we're not going to get something up on the website right away. It's a national issue. We don't do a ton of election coverage unless we're talking about our local MPs kind of thing, right? So I knew it wasn't going to affect my job in that way, but it is just a general dread of, okay, I'm the only South Asian person in my office. So, who's going to ask me for my hot take on how I feel about this? And I did. I avoided going to the kitchen for the first few hours of the day just because I didn't want to get into a conversation with anybody about it. Because you almost feel like you're pigeonholed. It's oh, okay, well, you're the brown girl, so I want your perspective. Yeah. Well, I don't feel like sharing my perspective. Yeah. So there was that. And it was also a dread of knowing that the way it was going to be covered was not going to be satisfactory. You just kind of have that sense of our media coverage in this country does not have enough of a diversity lens on it that you have faith that a story like this is going to drop and that you're going to be like, oh, wow, they did a really good job with this.
Well, especially, and I still remember, I guess, the emergency press conference that our Prime Minister did as soon as the photo dropped. The Liberal Party, specifically here in Brampton, Mississauga, where we're currently doing the show, is filled with diversity. None of those individuals were either visible in just the presentation of the Prime Minister even addressing what he had done and even maybe even apologizing to some of his ethnic members of his party. I haven't even heard any perspectives from some of the ethnic leaders within this area regarding this incident. Some of them have just, even when it comes to us trying to run debates here at Newstalk Saga 960, we've reached out to a couple of them to be a part of debates, and I feel like this has kind of scared them off as well. It's weird. It's so weird. I remember one photo that was so telling was the Toronto Star photo where it was Justin Trudeau is addressing the brownface incident in front of the Toronto Star, and again, there's no person of color in that room. It's what are we trying to accomplish here? It's so sad, and it
affects the coverage.
It does totally.
It will always affect the coverage, and it's a double-edged sword. I always say, because there is a side of it where it's okay, because like Arti said, because this is an incident that relates to my personal background. It's now you want my opinion for it, even though I've been sitting in this newsroom for years and you've never come to me to discuss politics necessarily.
And that always bothers me too, because I think that's also prevalent in in other workplaces too, where as soon as something happens, if this was an LGBTQ incident, and right away you're like, oh, well, who's LGBTQ, who identifies as this on our team? Let's get their perspective on it. Like, I find that to be such a weird motive. I get with the intention, but then again, is that just a big media company just trying to capitalize and, I don't know, in the era of the internet article, trying to get some clickbait?
And trying just to avoid the call-out culture of,
totally.
Of, oh, you had only, like, white journalists covering this. And they're like, oh, no, look at the brown girl on our team.
The one that normally writes about fashion. Oh, no, now she's completely woke.
Well, I think the other thing for that, too, is, we do have South Asian reporters in our newsroom. And, when we talked about this, we were sure people are going to ask us questions all day. And I remember when I was still at HuffPost, when Jagmeet Singh had his whole marriage and all that, that was a big, to me, that was actually a really big, interesting time in media to see how that was covered. Totally. Because nobody got it. Yeah. Nobody understood what was going on.
But they got Priyanka Chopra's marriage, though.
They did. That one was a little bit easier to follow.
They're like, how long is this ceremony? Oh, my God, it's 5 days. It's like, well, have you been to a South Asian wedding?
And that's the thing. It's like people are getting exposed to these things for the first time on this really big, mainstream national level. Priyanka Chopra is a perfect example, too, because even people at that time are like, why are there so many ceremonies, right? Like, she has so many outfits. I don't get it. And I always say, and I've been now in the industry for a long time, when every newsroom I've worked in, if anyone ever had a question about something like that, like Bollywood or something about brown people, they always come to me. And they always, come off as like, I don't want to sound offensive. And I'm like, you know what? I would rather you ask me
straight up
than later we publish something and then it's wrong. Yeah. Right? And because then who's at fault? We're all at fault. Yeah. Nobody checked it. There's probably not that many people of color who can check it in the first place. And then the reader finds out, and then you get in trouble. So I always put my hand up. Like, if you need something explained, I will explain to you. And if I don't get it, I'll probably have to call somebody else. I remember one time, this was a few years ago, there was a census release about how, I think it was Punjabi is like the second most common language.
In Brampton?
No, in Canada. It was some stat.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Years ago. Yeah. And everyone at work was like, okay, we need to post something about this. And there was nobody who spoke Punjabi. And then someone came up to me. They're like, do you understand? Do you know what we could write it about? And I'm like, no.
I'm not Punjabi.
I am not Punjabi. I don't understand. But I can help you. I can probably, I think I messaged Nikki, actually. I was like, what does this mean? Trying to find it myself. But there are times like that. I don't think people are doing it because they're being ignorant about it. I think it's sometimes, as a POC in a newsroom, it's part of your job almost. And it sucks that it's part of your job. But I think it's an important part of your job.
But I just find it sad that the onus gets put on both of you. Oh yeah, in these situations,
it's pressure, right? You feel it all the time because you feel like if you don't say something, because even with this whole brownface thing, I remember last week I was like, I can either take this two ways: I say nothing, or I go to work and I'm the face. I go on and be like, hey guys, put me on every radio station. I can talk about this. But I didn't take that, and I remember even a year ago when the whole Apu thing happened.
Apu.
And that day I wrote about it. I specifically pitched a story about how I wanted to get a South Asian perspective of what, brown kids growing up in North America actually think about Apu as the character. Is it racist? Is it not? And I pitched it myself because if it was going to get covered any other way, I would rather do it myself.
Oh, for sure.
And I did it. And I remember I went on the radio and I talked about it. And then it was a white host asking me, but is this really racist? And I'm like, when I was a kid, when I was a kid, people would call me Apu. Right? And I didn't think anything of it at that time, and I don't think it's a super racist thing maybe in context today.
Or you'd have them impersonate Apu's voice.
Yes, all the time.
Oh, he's so funny in The Simpsons.
Oh, does your mom and dad sound like that? Yeah, they kind of do. Yeah. But it's you kind of have to pick and choose your battles of what you want to talk about and what, because you can't do it all. I can't be the voice of every single brown story, and I'm not. My experience as a brown person is so both their experiences are so different.
Well, especially being born here, right?
Exactly, and so limited. So sometimes I don't even feel comfortable talking about things.
Well, but I think hearing both your perspectives just further, I guess, emphasizes the whole point of that Maclean's article regarding that there needs to be more diversity in these newsrooms, especially when you have political leaders now that are, Sikh, or you have, individuals that are LGBTQ that are having more prominent roles within society. You almost need to again, like, it's not about meeting a quota, but you almost have to think strategically when you're putting your newsrooms together regarding how do we make sure that what we're covering has the utmost credibility, that someone will not be offended or someone will not put into question what we're talking about. Because it's so dicey nowadays. Like, I find that our culture, we're getting more inclusive when it comes to the opportunities that are available, but we're almost becoming completely ignorant when it comes to how the media covers it.
Yeah, and inclusive is such a buzzword now, right?
I know, I use it all the time. It's a marketing word, yeah.
And like in the media landscape for sure, and I think just across companies in a general sense, like being inclusive is a top thing that people are really talking about, and something that they really want to be. And one thing I know that I spoke to my team about, because I often get questions just because they know that I am one of those people who I read a lot of the think pieces. I try to educate myself constantly on how to be more inclusive in my writing and my coverage of stories across all different topics, not just necessarily about the things that I personally relate to, like being a South Asian woman. And that was one thing I said to them, because if I'm getting questions about, okay, is this going to be offensive to people who are like Southeast Asian? Okay, well, I can't speak for all of them.
Yeah.
I can't tell you everything that could be. And like, you know, we wrote a piece on dumplings once, and they were like, okay, well, do you think anything in here is offensive? I have no idea. Like, I will go online. I will read these things. I will try and find out. And it's the same thing with the LGBTQ plus community. And it's, you know, because you're that person who they know, like, has a real vested interest in wanting to be inclusive in everything that you do, they come to you with these questions. And it's like, okay, well, wait. And I spoke to them about it. It's like, I am not a subject matter expert, nor is there a guidebook. Like, my Canadian Press style book does not include inclusivity. Like, I can't just open it up and be like, this is how
you can't just write an article or run it through this sensitivity rigor. Exactly. That's going to be like, no, you can say this, but you can't say that.
And I had someone at work then say to me, like, okay, but then how do we figure it out? And I was like, we have to do it together. Like, you have to get online. You have to read things pieces too. You have to try and it's a huge pool of things that you have to jump into. And it is a crazy amount of information to try and take in. But it's a general interest in one part to me. And you just have to make a vested effort to go through, read this information, try to understand the viewpoint of other communities, try to speak to those people about how they're portrayed in the news and how things are, how they're consuming that information and what they're unhappy with. That is the mark of a good journalist, really, because you're supposed to be a voice that's speaking to the community.
So going back a week and a half when the story first dropped, what would you have liked to have seen when it came to the coverage? Like, what do you think would have been fair and more reflective regarding the actual issue at hand versus what we got?
I mean, I think for me, you know, obviously the news story is the news story. You know, he did this happened, this is the feedback, this is the apology, this is what, you know, happened the next day, and these are the people in the photo. Great. I understand all of that aspect from a political standpoint.
Talking about the Uncle G's in the photo, too?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure they tried to find them, too.
Well,
they did.
They did. They found one, and he was totally like, oh, no, it wasn't offensive. Like, everyone should get off his back. And yeah, it was interesting.
And they even recently found the guy who sent the photo to Time.
It was like a big reveal. Yeah.
So that was a whole thing too. And I understand all these follow-ups, and I get, you know, it's juicy, it's scandalous, that's news. But one thing that I would have loved to see is sort of, you know, I don't want to pigeonhole all brown people either, because it's not like every brown person even has a perspective on this. But like, you know, what is their perspective on this? You know, how do you feel about this? And I talked to a lot of my family and friends who don't work in media. So I think when you work in media, you're also in another bubble. Your Twitter is another bubble. Your interaction with people is another bubble. But I asked a lot of them, and they were like, okay, like, yeah, this is bad, but like, did he say anything? Like, did he say sorry? And I'm like, he did. Oh, okay. Right. And that was it. That was the response. And then I had friends who were like, oh my gosh, you know, this is the complete example of racism, and this is why racism exists.
Well, Pierre Trudeau is held in such high regard for allowing our
especially
parents
for
being in the country. So to your point, like, that's a similar conversation I had with a couple of elders in my family, and they're like, oh, you know, it wasn't good, but again, it's like, oh, we're not going to stop supporting him because his dad was this.
Exactly.
And my parents love Pierre.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think for a lot of people this, you know, sure, polls indicate that it will change their vote, but for a lot of people it won't.
Well, what's fascinating about the polls, and I don't want to get super political because we got cut to commercial break soon, but there's no movement on the NDP side. Like, if anything, the NDP's gone lower. And that's alarming to me. Like, I want to see an analysis on that, where there was so much hate put on Justin for doing what he did. You would think that there would be a bit of remorse for the NDP and a bit of an upswing for Jagmeet in regards to the way he addressed it. Because I remember when he spoke about it, he was kind of in tears about it, and he wanted to have a sit down with Justin and talk about it. But we're not getting any of that, which makes this... I don't know. This whole election is just kind of gross to me, but
it's almost over.
Is it? Yeah, we have what, like 3 weeks? Oh, can't wait. Nikki, what would you have liked to see differently?
For me, when I was reading the McLean's piece, what Manisha said, like, just completely put it all into words for me. She had said that what they were missing was no one was asking him, okay, you didn't think it was racist, but what were you thinking? Walk us through your thought process, because that was kind of my thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't know Justin Trudeau personally in any way. I've never met him, but I have never looked at him and thought that, like, this man is a racist or this man has, like, racist ideology or anything like that. So to me, it was like, okay, I get it. 18 years ago, sure. But 18 years ago, I was still alive and I was not that young. And I could never, like, if I was getting into costume for any sort of themed party, I would never change my skin color.
Totally.
That's one thing with blackface and brownface that I personally, it's such a block for me. Like, I can't figure out why the person who doesn't mean to be offensive in any way, it seems, thinks that that's what they should do. And so that was what I really wanted. That was the question I really wanted asked too. Like, please walk us through your thought process, because I think that's something that a lot of people of color wonder, because it seems like, you know, the black face and the brown face usually comes up on the white side of the spectrum, right? It's not generally, and I'm sure other people of color have done this too, but just for me, in my experience of it, that's what I'm always thinking. I'm like, but what made you think that that's what you should have done?
And the fact that everybody that was there thought it was okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's, again, we told, to your point, 18 years ago, obviously times were different. This was, pre 9/11 as well. So, obviously things were a little different at that sort of time and place. But, no, I agree with that. Just getting into the psyche regarding, okay, why?
Yeah,
and then
why?
Why other incidents as well? Like, why blackface and singing
why the other
J.O.?
times?
Like, that's... I feel like we can do an entire show on this, but we're not, because we're going to move on. I do want to talk about another interesting story that came out this week, and it sort of involves inclusivity. I know that's the buzzword for today's show, courtesy of Nikki. And that's Mattel recently announcing a new line of gender-neutral dolls, which are being marketed as dolls for everyone. The dolls come with no obvious gender. They just come with a variety of different clothes. And it's really an opportunity to really allow children to choose regarding how they want to play, engage with this doll and bring it into their life, and really also teach them about how gender is, can be a construct and not something that you're born with. Wanted to get both your theories on the move that Mattel made, whether you're for it, whether you're against it, as well as kind of get your thoughts on the fact that Mattel, who's historically, their bread and butter is obviously Barbie, which is the complete, I would say, opposite of this move that they just made. On whether, like, this is the right move to be making for kids that are 10 years and younger, and whether, we should be starting to introduce some of these elements to them. I'm actually becoming a parent in 2 weeks. No, sorry, 2 months. Not 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I was going to scare myself. And these are the kinds of things that I'm starting to think about now. Especially in the society that we live in, and how things are different, and with the internet, and even just thinking about how some parents that are within my age demo are approaching their parenthood and really thinking about things differently. These are some of the areas that I'm looking into considering regarding, how am I going to introduce some of these concepts to my child when they're ready. But Arti, you had mentioned that you had seen these dolls already. Explain to me, give us your quick review on what Mattel had done.
So, sorry, I actually got the doll sent to me last week. The packaging, I was just like, what is this,
Which one did you get?
So I got the white version of it.
Okay.
They have a few races, different ethnicities, but the one I got was this white doll. It didn't have a lot of hair.
It's okay, take your time.
Sorry. My voice today is not cooperating with me. Didn't have a lot of hair, but it had like 2 sets of wigs.
Oh, okay. So you can choose what hairstyle? Was like one your because I think I didn't see the full packaging. I just saw sort of the rollout of the commercial, or like the photos of it was one more of like your conventional female hairstyle, which is long, and the other one maybe short.
Yeah, so one was a short like buzz cut, and the other one was long like luscious locks. So it had a bunch of different outfits. There were some more, quote unquote feminine outfits. There were skirts and dresses and tank tops, and then there were sort of quote unquote male outfits. There was dress shirts and pants. So the whole kind of PR behind this is to really let kids explore the doll and dress it up as they would like. And I mean, we were playing with it at the office ourselves, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's just fun because you never really see that.
Yeah.
And I grew up playing dolls. I grew up playing Barbie. If I got this when I was a kid, it would have been a completely different experience.
Especially because I grew up a big wrestling fan, which if you listen to my show, there's a lot of wrestling influence, including later on the show when we get Andrew McRae on. But I remember as a kid not knowing any better, because my sister's 6 years older than me. So when she was like 8, I was 2. I used to like wrestle with her Barbies. Like I used to pretend like they were pro wrestlers, and like I never knew what a Barbie was at that point, but like that was like a moment that she would always bring up, like, oh, I used to play with my Barbies, but I used to think that they were like male wrestlers. Now fast forward to that, like what I find interesting about these dolls is it does sort of open up the conversation, but it again, like doll, like as a male, you get teased if you play with a doll. Now it's not like that, because I feel like if I have a son, I could give him this toy, and they could, if they want to make it into a man, they can make it into a man, or if they want to, do whatever they want, they could do that. And it kind of creates an easier entryway in regards to the types of conversations I could have with my son or daughter. I don't know what I'm having, but I just find from a parenting sort of conversation standpoint, it eases into it versus having those awkward moments of, hey, let's talk about gender or the birds and the bees. I don't know.
I mean, and it's almost, I love it. I love the dolls. And one of the things that we were talking about just at work is just like, imagine giving this to your kid and not really explaining it. Like, yes, you can explain that you can dress it up in whatever gender you want. But imagine this is how children get introduced at that age, where you're innocent, you're sort of naive about things, and this is your perception. Like, okay, maybe a boy can wear a dress, and maybe a girl can wear a suit, and that's okay. That's okay. And it's almost normalized for them. Because I think what dolls and what toys do, they normalize things for us. So when you think about when you're a kid, you see a Barbie, you see a really slender, skinny doll with beautiful, luscious blonde hair. And I remember the first time I got a brown Barbie, I like freaked out, because it was the first time I saw a doll that kind of looked similar to me. But all the Barbies that I had growing up were mostly white.
Yeah.
So at that time, that, it normalizes what beauty is. It normalized what beauty was to me. I thought a beautiful woman was a white woman with blonde hair.
Yeah.
I thought that for years and years and years into my life, until, I was into my late 20s. So I think when I thought about it, I'm like, what are these kids thinking at that age? I have like 2 little nieces. I'm like, if I gave that to them, what are they going to think at that age? That this is okay, or this is maybe weird, or this is kind of uncomfortable, or this is new for them? But at some point, it almost normalizes the fact of that this is, people can dress however they want, and it's okay.
Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I also love what Mattel is doing here. My big thing for it was, yes, thinking about my experience with Barbies when I was a kid, and when they did come out and make more of an effort to have more diverse Barbies, and thinking about it that way, like what it would have been like for me as a kid to have like a South Asian Barbie. And so for these kids who might be questioning their gender at, age 8, age 9, to see themselves in a Barbie as well, it's really a lot of those same feelings where you just kind of feel represented and you don't feel so alienated, that this could be something that's normal, even though it might not be something that your family's talking about or anything like that. So in that same way that it's such a big deal, like my favorite Barbie doll growing up was my Scary Spice Barbie doll, because it was the closest thing to me.
Totally.
She was the closest thing to me. I never got a brown Barbie. I wonder where Arti got hers. But
did you go to India? Was it actually a Barbie, or was it something else?
It was actually from India.
Yeah, of course.
Because it had a sari on.
Oh, okay.
My cousin, I think she bought it from India.
Wow.
It said Barbie on the box. I thought it was a real Barbie.
You sure it's spelled right? Barbie with 2 E's at the
end. Probably wasn't real, now that I think about it.
But that's the interesting part. It's funny, as you guys were talking, I was obviously listening, but I'm reading some of these like interesting comments regarding this launch. One was, Barbie debuts gender-inclusive dolls because kids don't want their toys dictated by gender norms. And it was just a total hate-style message regarding this and how, why can't we just let kids be kids? Why do we got to educate them on this at an early age? My thought on this is I'm also for it because I find it interesting because when you read about individuals that have had challenges when it comes to identifying what gender they are, to me, it starts at that age. Like, it's not like, oh, you know, I'm in high school and all of a sudden, no, I feel like a girl today. No, it's like, it's usually something that starts like 10 and below. Like, I've seen research on that. I've read stories where a lot of people start questioning themselves when they are in that age bracket. That I think this is, like, to me, like, I look at this doll as a bit of a stress check regarding, okay, where does, like how does the child identify? Like, where's their head at this moment? Like, do they feel a certain way? Is there something that, you know, I need to do from a parenting standpoint to further along their journey in regards to helping them find themselves so that they don't feel lost later on? That's what I find intriguing by it. Like, I do commend, especially since Barbie always gets a bad rep too. Mm-hmm. Like, to your point, Arti, like, growing up playing with a doll has like the perfect body shape, that's always on its tippy toes, that has long blonde hair.
Always wears heels. Yeah. And then when you started, I've never worn heels. So I'm sure when both of you started, I probably had a lot of pain and gain. Still today.
Yeah, still today. Yeah, it's cool to see that. And I'm glad that they did multiple ethnicities as well, because I find that to be intriguing. It sort of reminds me of when Disney finally did like a black Disney princess with was it The Princess and the Frog or whatever? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now Ariel.
Yes, Ariel. Was it Chloe?
Yes.
Hallie.
Chloe's her partner. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or sister. I don't know. I'm sure. Well, they're both dealing with Beyonce. Yeah, they're twins. According to my brother, they're twins. How do you both feel about introducing these types of concepts at an early age? Do you feel like it's necessary in today's sort of parenting world, or do you think that there should be a bit of a buffer, like maybe like age 13 or 14, when you can actually have deep conversations with your child? That's when you probably want to pick their brain. Like, I don't know, like, that's what I'm trying to gauge here is like, do you feel like right like the age that they're targeting is the right age to have these conversations?
I mean, I think it should be. I mean, I don't have children that age, or any children for that matter, but I think it makes sense. You know, I think at an age where, you know, you're a kid, you question everything.
You do. You totally do.
You question everything you see, and, you know, maybe it may even be offensive, but you question everything because whatever you know is your norm, right? It's what you hear at home, it's what you watch on TV and what you consume. And if you go to school and you're having friends and you're having conversations, that's it. That's your life, right? So maybe these things are very nuanced, and I think even for some people, gender is still it's a very nuanced concept to understand and to accept that, you know, not everybody goes one way or the other. Like, some people don't even feel like they have a gender specifically.
Yeah. Well, non-binary.
So, exactly. So I think, to me, I think that is the right age. You know, I think when kids have questions, it's okay, it's going to happen. But as parents, you know, it's our job to then explain those answers. It's our job to allow our kids to have questions, or even if they're playing with this doll, ask them, you know, what do you think about this? Is this, or watch them play, you know, interact with it. I think it's the right age. I feel like one of the issues that, I mean, again, not a parent, I have no idea, but I think we're almost scared to talk about things. You know, we're scared to talk about
totally
race.
Are.
We're scared to talk about sexuality. We're scared to talk about gender diversity, everything. We're always scared, and we think, and, you know, I remember the whole sex ed thing in Ontario a few years ago. That's exactly
where I was going to go next.
And all the conversations that came up from a lot of people of color, especially, you know, there's no way we cannot tell our kids about being gay because they will become gay. You know, and this is like the scary thought that people have, and they think it's the end of the world. But I think we really need to put more trust into our children. Like trust them a little bit more and have these conversations.
And I just don't. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I was going to bring up next. Is I remember when the government was introducing the new sex ed curriculum, and at the time I was on Rogers TV, and we had a very outspoken Muslim mother who was like, I totally against it. And it was a show that we did call-ins, so we actually had someone who was a lesbian call in, and actually it was a debate. I remember that. I'll always remember that segment because I barely said any words, because it was like a debate with like a caller and the person, and nobody was budging. But to me, I was for it because, again, the internet's a scary place. Like, I'd rather, and that's why, like, even when these dolls were first announced, I'm like, man, this is kind of cool, because I'm like, this is almost a great educational tool too.
For sure.
Because,
and that's, I think, what it is.
Yeah. Like I don't think it's meant to be just like a Barbie where you play with it and you end up spending tons of money on the Barbie dream house or whatever or wherever this doll chooses to live. Maybe it's like an affordable apartment or a shared residence based on if you really want to reflect reality. But that's where my head went. I was like, this is kind of cool from an educational standpoint, because, if you are engaging in those types of conversations in the classroom, this doll might be a great segue into that.
And there are probably a ton of parents who look at something like this and they're going to be like, no way.
Oh, 100%.
Sure.
Even on Twitter right now, as I just search Mattel, like, there's already parent groups hating on Mattel for this.
Never. I would never let my child be exposed to this. Well, you know what? At some point, your child will be exposed
100%.
to this, and you weren't the one who told them.
Yeah.
And I think people are really not thinking about how much gender norms are put on kids from the minute they come out of the womb. I have a niece and I have a nephew. My niece is 2 years older than my nephew, and it's something I made a really big effort not to do to them. Like, I wasn't like, oh, you have to like pink and you have to like blue. I was very against it. My whole family knew it, and I made a really big effort for it. I remember my niece got a jacket once, and it was like a black jacket, and my dad was like, oh, like you, and she was still really young, and he was like, oh, you got a black jacket? That's not very girly. And she turned and she was like, what does girly mean? And I was like, and she should never know what that word means. It just like went off. And the thing is, and I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it's just so much a part of like our nature as a society and how we look at boys and girls. And we were the kind of family that really, like, if he wants to play with her toys and she wants to play with his toys, they can go for it. But there is still this sense of, if she wants to go play with all the superheroes and the action figures, that's totally fine. If she wants to put on the Spider-Man costume, that's totally fine today. But if he wants to dress up as Elsa tomorrow, that doesn't feel as fun.
I know. That's where, like, all this, like, and that's what I find interesting too, is I always, again, trying to phrase this in a way where I don't offend anybody, but it seems like when females or when girls do venture into that territory, it's a lot easier to accept versus little boys. As soon as little boys, like, everyone starts freaking out. And so my wife Anu and I have chose not to find out what we're having. And that's driving all the youngies in my family wild. And a lot of it has to do with the points you just brought up. Like, what are we going to buy for the baby shower? Is it going to be pink? Is it going to be blue? Like, you don't want to see your kid in gray. And I'm like, look, like, we don't want to find out because of personal choice, because we want to keep it a surprise. But then I'm like, just buy whatever you want. Like, if it's a pink outfit, honestly, the kid's going to be like barely 1 year old. If they end up puking on themselves, I'm going to put the pink outfit on them, because I'm not like, I'm going to be cognizant to the fact that, like, laundry is going to be a big part of it and I'm going to need clothes. Like, I'm not concerned by that. But it's such an ethnic thing, though, I find. And that's where I think the challenge, and I hate to typecast here, but maybe it'll be different with our generation, but I find that this is where you start to get a bit dicey.
I mean, Nikki knows how much I hate blue and pink.
Really?
Oh, my goodness.
Blue is my favorite color, but yeah.
Colors individually, great. But this idea that, like, one child has to wear this color because this is the color that they will present to the world. And, like, think about how ridiculous that sounds,
Well, even I wanted to do a fake gender reveal. And I wanted the color to be like
purple.
I literally, I wanted it to be gray. And I remember my wife telling me, "Hey, don't do it. You're gonna actually piss a lot of people off." But I'm like, let's do a fake gender reveal, just because, like, we don't want to find out. Because gender reveals are just not my thing. Like, I just think they're so. Especially when I think, was it you that posted about the gender reveal lasagna?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you had done that.
Oh my God. What happened there?
There's a gender reveal lasagna where you can get, like, one color in the actual lasagna. It's kind of gross.
Right.
That's a lot of food coloring. But that's why I'm not a fan of gender reveals, because I'm like, why are we putting so much emphasis
and to
on
each
this?
their own, right? Like, I mean, I've been to a few gender reveals and the parents were really excited to find out. And I remember one of the ones that I went to, the couple had said that, there were people in their lives, friends or maybe distant people, that were like, I can't believe you're having a gender reveal, like in this day and age. Like, you know what, let people, like, it's their kids, and they're not, as long as they're not harming their children in any way, like, let people parent as they want to parent. I haven't spoken to any parents about these Mattel Barbies, but or dolls, but I have spoken to parents, for example, with like the sex ed curriculum and them being worried about introducing their kids to concepts like same-sex marriages and things like that at a young age. And one of the things they had said was, you know, I'm so worried that if we provide the kids all this information at a young age, that they're going to want to try it. Which is, I mean, I have no way of saying, like, no, it's definitely not going to happen. But that just doesn't connect with me. Like, I would just never think that way. Like, it's just like, this is something that is in the world. And I'm more so erring on the side of, if you are that kid in that classroom who's growing up with same-sex parents, to see the information that's being given to you and your classmates and not seeing your family in it, and not seeing, like, that's the kid that I'm thinking about, rather than the kids who, you know, fall into the nuclear family. And it goes across so many different borders, like whether it's a single parent household, and then whether you don't have your biological parents in your life, and all of these things. Like, it breaks my heart to think about those kids who aren't represented in what they're seeing.
I actually have a lot of same-sex couple friends that have kids, and that's one of the things that they bring up is, like, they're actually going to the extreme of, like, looking into private schools that actually are more inclusive. Here, because there's another buzzword, but because they worry about that. They worry about their kid being in an environment where they're going to be picked on because they're so-called different, and they're not going to be able to relate to what they have at home, which I think is super important, which I think that needs to happen, and I think needs to be representative of just what's going on versus them feeling ostracized at such a young age, because we all know kids are pretty cruel. Yeah.
And the world is pretty cruel, and they become teenagers and they, you know, harm themselves.
I know.
That's what really weighs on my mind. That we have to reach out to these kids at a young age to make them feel like they're not alone, to show them that they do have a place in this world and there is a community behind them, and give them the support, because they might not be getting it at home, and in a lot of these cases they're not.
Just one other way to look at this, and then we'll talk about the Super Bowl quickly. Great segue. How much of this do you feel like is a marketing ploy by Mattel? Do you feel like it is? Like, do you feel like a lot of organizations now are like, hey, we need to find new revenue streams. Let's jump on whatever everyone's talking about? Because coming from the business world, sometimes I do feel a bit skeptical when I see things like this, where I'm like, hey, they're just trying to cash in or cash out, and they're just trying to tap into a demo, and the worst thing that could happen is them being exposed later on, because that would just absolutely kill your business on both aspects of it. But we've seen it time again where some organizations just jump on something because they're like, look, we want to seem progressive, we also want to make an easy buck. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think diversity is good business. I think for any organization, you know, when you invest in diversity, whatever that means, you make more money because you're reaching, you know, a whole larger audience. Like, look at the movies, look at the whole Black Panther movement, and look at how much money that created. But I think for things like this, even if it is a marketing ploy, I mean, you know, businesses aren't dumb. They're doing things. They're investing a lot of money into something like this because they know that it would create buzz or it would do well. So there is that aspect. And I also think a lot of businesses are trying, you know, we're going to say it again, to be inclusive. You know, I think they're trying the best way that they can to be inclusive in today's day and age. So when I see a doll like this come out, I don't want to jump so quickly on the company and be like, oh, well, they're just doing this because, you know, they're trying to make money. I think it's good that they are. Yeah. Because if they didn't, who else is going to do it? Exactly. Right? And this is the master behind the biggest toy brand in the world. If they're not the ones who are doing it, who's going to do it?
Did Mattel come out with like a line of Barbies that where Barbie had like, did they change the shape?
Yeah, they did do body diversity. That was
yeah. And
they did body. They did they did a lot of like women, girls who had like STEM careers. That was a whole movement. Yeah. You know, there's obviously like the ethnicity side behind it. They changed all the faces. They tried to make Barbies specifically look different. Yeah. That she wasn't this like super skinny, you know, tiptoed blonde girl. So it's a slow burn. You know, all of these things, it's going to take some time. And maybe, you know, in 20 years from now, we can have this conversation again. And we're like, oh, non-gender neutral dolls. What do you mean? That's just a normal part of, I got that for my kid last week, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm playing with one right now.
I'm playing with one right now.
I mean, I'm sure there is another company. I'm trying to remember in the Time magazine article about this, if they did speak about another company that was doing this, a much smaller company that was doing gender fluid dolls that didn't have the typical male or female features. And I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's somewhere out there on Etsy or something where you can order this for your kids. And then there is that side of the argument where it's like, okay, well, you're just capitalizing on this idea that somebody else had, and that person's probably from this community, and there is that side of it, and I totally get that side of it, but at the same time, you want to see something like this mainstream.
Oh, totally. Totally.
So it is, have a foot in both camps where I'm like, yep, the person who's from the community should be benefiting from it, and putting forward that voice really from within to know what they want these dolls to look like and anything like that. But at the same time, you want to be able to walk into, a Walmart and get this doll for anybody in your life, and just have it as something that's so mainstream.
I almost equate it to when big corporations jump on like the ethnic holidays. And in some ways it's like, oh, okay, like, so-and-so's wishing me happy Diwali, cool, like they're really trying, they're like translating their ads, or they're having images of diyas and all that. I only pick on Diwali because Diwali's coming up, but like from having the marketing background that I have and sort of working with some of these big organizations, for me, I enjoy it because then it provides a halo on some of the other things that I need to do, and it drives sort of that multicultural agenda, and having a big organization attached to it does open doors, like does push it forward, which wouldn't be the case, as much as we want to support local and want to support these smaller organizations, it's a lot harder to break through.
And especially like mass production, right?
100%.
Like, think about how many dolls we'll see in a Walmart versus not seeing it like in a place like Walmart.
Totally. We have a few minutes left, but I want to get both your thoughts on the Super Bowl, because I feel like both of you guys are big NFL fans.
Love the NFL.
Yeah, I know, I figured. Well, we could talk about Raptors Media Day. It's up to you.
Oh. We can stick with Super Bowl.
Okay, let's do that. We'll save the Raptors for when they start. We can do a theories on the upcoming season because I'm less optimistic about it. But anyways, so the Super Bowl announced that the halftime show is J-Lo and Shakira. We've done conversations in the past on this show regarding sort of the NFL and the Jay-Z partnership, and early on when I created this show, we did just a conversation on the halftime show and just how it's for this, last year I felt like it wasn't really relevant with Maroon 5, and this year it looks like they're going a different direction. Obviously, with the Super Bowl being in Miami, it looks like they're really trying to tap into that demo within sort of the Miami market. But what are your thoughts on this? Like, what are your thoughts on just the direction that the NFL has been taking when it comes to using music as a way to become more inclusive? Because, again, you got two big-time figures in J-Lo and Shakira headlining it, but that is obviously tapping into the Spanish demo that exists within the U.S. They have a partnership with Jay-Z that's really pushing out sort of political reform and allowing the NFL to be more woke, in quotations. Do you feel like they're making the right moves? Like, do you like the direction that they're going in, or is there still more that needs to be done?
I'm so anti-NFL. I think it's really easy for me to say
You're more
that.
of a CFL fan.
Great more than the NFL, though. But it's easy for me to say that because I was never pro NFL. Like, I never grew up really watching a lot of football, and so if this was the NHL that we were talking about, I might have more of a struggle with being like, I'm never going to watch a game because I was born and raised a Leafs fan. But so it is easy for me to just detach and be like, this is not the sporting industry for me. I don't want anything to do with the NFL. I am one of those people who would just tune in for the halftime show, and I've stopped doing that in the last few years. So it is easy for me to just say, like, don't care about the NFL. But, in some ways, like, sure, you have two women of color, tapping into the Latino market. You're going to be in Miami. I get it. Like, I understand all of the things that were there. They said they wanted to partner with Jay-Z to bring back major stars, J-Lo being one of those stars. Arti and I were talking about it on the way over here today, being like, it's usually the person who runs the halftime show is the person who's, like, having a moment right now.
Totally,
and J-Lo is having a moment.
Oh, yeah.
So much of it makes sense. I just have so many issues with that league in, like, the treatment of like obviously the black players and their right to kneel during the anthem and things like that, but even just like also the treatment of women on like their dance teams and their cheerleading teams. I know Arti did a whole story on it a year or two ago that really opened my eyes to a lot of like really unfair practices and policies that they have in place. So it's just, I think this partnership with Jay-Z is like a small step, probably not the right step, doesn't feel that great to me. And I feel like there's so many other things that they could focus on to make their league seem better to those of us who are so detached from them. Well,
it's to me, and again, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan. Like, Jay-Z's my favorite MC of all time. I was kind of lukewarm to the deal. Like, I remember tweeting out initially, like, hey, this is such a boss move for him to do this. And I get what he's trying to do. But to some of the points you brought up, Nikki, like, the NFL isn't totally foolproof yet. Like, there's still a lot that needs to be fixed. And I feel like going this route with Latino superstars, or, you know, trying to get, you know, a Meek Mill to perform at your, like, opening game is just a quick fix. Like, oh, look at how progressive we are. Like, and then I think I read that Pitbull is now trying to get involved in the halftime show, which honestly, like, I'm not. I'm probably not going to watch. I'll be honest. Like, I'm not. That's like, it's not. Like, hey, J-Lo still looks fantastic. Shakira is very good looking, but if you got Pitbull there, it's okay. I'll pass. Arti, what do you think? Like, do you think it's they're headed in the right direction?
I mean, I think there's so many things that are removed from this. I think we're looking at the NFL as, you know, this organization that does have these problematic, you know, policies, practices. We've seen the history. I was even thinking about Travis Scott last year and sort of the backlash that he got because he decided to do the show anyway as a black artist. And, you know, I find all that stuff very problematic. But I think people also look at the halftime show as an entertainment show, you know? And the halftime show historically has been one of the biggest, it is, I would argue, one of the biggest entertainment shows
100%.
On TV. You know, we remember Beyonce on during the halftime show. We remember Justin and Janet. You know, we remember all these sort of pop culture significant moments that have come from the halftime show. So when I saw the news that day, I didn't even know what to think. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Because I couldn't even think of anybody else who would do it.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Who else would do it this year? Because even last year, I found Maroon 5 to be a complete stretch. Yeah. I think Travis Scott was having a great year, but I'm like, Maroon 5, okay. Yeah. But even this year, people were like, oh, it's going to be Jay-Z and Rihanna and Beyonce. I'm like, it's not.
I think everyone thought it was going to be like a big like Rock Nation move. And
I don't think they're there yet. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about Jay-Z joining the NFL, and I read a lot of think pieces about it, specifically about Jay-Z. Like, what does this mean now, right? This is an avenue. He's making a ton of money from this. But where is this going? And like Nikki said, there's so many things the NFL can do. Yeah. Right? There's so many things that they can do. It's weird to see them, because they are the same thing. The halftime show in the NFL league itself is the same thing, but a lot of people are just seeing it in a very different light. They're seeing it in two completely different things. And it is also easy for me to be like, okay, well, you know, I probably have to cover it that day, so I'm going to watch it. But, you know, I don't watch football. I'm not a fan. But if this had happened in the NBA, that'd be different for me, too.
100%.
Like, it's a complete different reaction. But I think the halftime show, the significance of it on its own is so much more powerful than, like, the All-Star game. Like, the Super Bowl is one of the most watched things in the world.
It's still a big juggernaut. Like, it's still something that each year always brings in monster. Like, even though ratings may be on a bit of a decline, like, it still brings in monster ratings, and people still talk about the halftime show, whether it's good or bad.
And they will. You're going to see every single person that Sunday night covering it. You're going to see what the ads are that day. You're going to see all the celebrities this year who probably who got paid millions of dollars to be in these ads, and we're all going to watch it. So I think it's such a normalized part of our consumption that people either they're not caring about it or they don't want to care. It's like they kind of just forget about everything happening in the background.
Totally.
It's such a normalized thing. Like, we have Super Bowl parties, you know? We have bar nights and pub nights, and we all go.
People who don't watch football, they'll still just throw a party.
Just exactly. Like, every year, people go to football parties, and nobody watches football during the year.
It's fascinating because we just talked about Mattel and the move that they made. Now thinking about it, I feel like Mattel's kind of eased into this whole movement that they're trying to convey with this new line of gender neutral dolls. I feel like the NFL hasn't really like eased into it. Like, I feel like to me, I'm like, okay, like now it just seems like, hey, we're getting so inclusive now. There's that word again. We're just gonna move ahead and talk about political reform and talk about diversity and get females to headline the halftime show and make sure the females are ethnic and they are this and that. Like it seems like they're moving at a really fast pace where it doesn't seem authentic. That's just my.
I don't think it is. I think it's at the end of the day, it's business. Right?
It is. It's totally business.
It's money.
Yeah.
And the NFL makes a lot of money.
A ton.
Yeah, and they have a huge fan base still. And I think even with all the things that we've seen in the last few years, sort of unfold in especially today's day and age, when we talk about diversity and we talk about race, especially in the U.S. Like think about the impact that's had in the U.S. It's still a business and still making a ton of money.
It's interesting because I thought if they really, again, this is me just being totally biased, but like if they really were thinking about race and just, about all the slander that they've been getting over the last 2 years involving Cap and all that, I thought they probably would have went with a bit of a political feel with the halftime show just to make a further statement. It's not to knock J-Lo and Shakira. Like, I think it's going to be a good show to what we're all talking about, and I think it's the right move for that market. I just thought, based on the type of buzz that they were making with this partnership with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z flat out saying, hey, I'm here to steer them in the right direction, and he was getting a lot of slander for it, but he's like, whatever, I'm going to help them. I thought they would have made a bigger statement with the halftime show, but to each their own. They're going to your point, they're going to make a ton of money, and we're all probably going to watch.
Who else would have done it? We're all going to watch it, but who else would have done it?
DMX, he just got out of jail. Yeah, I would have seen a DMX halftime show,
like a Meek Mill halftime show.
It would be kind of random because he isn't at that level.
No,
but having him included with what's another poppy band? I don't know. Like a Fall Out Boy.
Like a Weezer Fall Out Boy.
Yeah. Like
the whole 90s themed.
Yeah, I thought Green Day was going to do it.
Think about even Drake. I don't think Drake would do that.
I don't think Drake would either. I found this year, you talked about the All-Star game. I thought this year was the most fascinating contrast of leagues when you saw the NFL move with Maroon 5 and the forced Travis Scott placement. And then you had the NBA All-Star game with J. Cole, as your halftime. J. Cole could have been cool too. He's having quite the year as well. Maybe he's not as big as a J-Lo. Obviously, I think J-Lo is killing it. But I don't know. I just thought they would have went a different direction. But we're all going to watch, so what difference does it make? We're all just going to be slaves to the TV that day.
We can still critique it. That's the end of the day.
That's why we have shows like New Theory Radio. Wanted to thank the both of you guys for coming on. This was great.
This was
This is a really fun conversation. I'm so happy that we were able to finally do this. Arti, thanks for bringing Nikki
thanks
here
for keeping at it.
Yeah,
so good.
No, I'm super persistent. And when I see good people, I want to have them on the show so we can complain together. If people want to reach out to either one of you and Didihood, what's the best way? Nikki, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, so Didihood, you can catch us on Instagram at Didihood, Didihood, and on Facebook and Twitter at the Didihood. And for me, you can catch me basically on all social media at Nickjeet, at NIKKJIT.
Nice. Are you the only Nick Jeet?
Oh, I am. That's why it's so easy.
You got to trademark that. ASAP. There might be another one.
Definitely a made-up name, but great when you're looking for a social handle.
There's a Jennifer Jeet in Peel, too.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys are repping. I love it. I love the fusion. Arti, what about you?
Twitter. Twitter is my domain. I love
That's how
Twitter.
you and I became friends.
Yeah, I love Twitter. I love interacting. I love meeting people on Twitter. I'm just Arti Patel on Twitter. Find me.
Yeah.
And send me a tweet.
We'll do a theory on Twitter episode.
Oh, I love Twitter.
I have so many people I hate Twitter. I never use it. And I'm like, why not? Twitter is my source for everything. When something drops, when the Trudeau thing happened, it was Twitter.
Immediately on Twitter.
Immediately.
To those people, I always say, those memes you love? They're all from Twitter.
There you go. Most of them are just screenshots of tweets that people just post on the gram. Thanks so much for joining us here. We'll definitely have you guys on in the near future. And when we come back here on New Theory Radio, we're going to be joined by Andrew McRae, a.k.a. Freedom Wallace. He's a fantastic local independent wrestler here based within the Peel region. We're going to be talking about 2 shows he has coming up next week. And we'll be right back here on News Talk Saga 960.
Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is a show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And what we like to do around this time on New Theory Radio is we like to let you know what's going on in the community. And if you've been paying attention to the show for the last, I guess, few months, you know that I myself am a big wrestling fan. So there's always a wrestling tie-in here on New Theory Radio. I kind of force fit it in. But I'm super excited to have a good friend of mine, someone I used to pseudo workout with back in the day, but not really. But I think I definitely need a workout. So Andrew, hopefully soon I'll pop by Battle Arts to get my butt whooped. But he is a fantastic local wrestler here within the PO region. I say also a local entrepreneur as well. Would you say that?
That's fair, Nav.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll take you up on that. I will whip your butt anytime, anywhere. You know where to find me.
I do. It is my good friend, Andrew McRae, a.k.a. Freedom Wallace. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us on New Theory Radio. I used to interview you on Rogers TV. Now we're on radio together.
Yeah, moving on up.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. You too, man. You actually, was it last year that you were on WWE?
I was on WWE television last year.
Yeah.
So I wrestled on 205 Live. So it was actually on the WWE network.
Oh, okay.
But it was still live.
So there's a paywall, so you have to pay to see you.
You do have to pay to see me, yes.
Well, you fought another previous guest on New Theory Radio, Buddy Murphy.
Buddy Murphy was a guest on the show.
Yeah, I got to interview him during SummerSlam, and we did. It was a great interview. Like, he gave us a good 10 minutes, and it was cool because we talked about, and you can probably relate to this too. We talked about sort of maximizing your spot in when you're working in an organization. Like, if you're given an opportunity, really maximizing it. Mm-hmm. And at the time he was barely on TV, so this is right before he had that long run of matches with Roman and Mustafa Ali and Daniel Bryan. But it was a cool conversation. And I feel like you kind of did that when you fought him. Like, you really maximized your minutes and made things happen.
Well, I was out there for about 90 seconds.
Okay.
So I made
maximized your minute.
I made I made the most of my immediate decimation.
Yeah.
I like to think that I set him off on his current course.
Oh, you definitely did,
towards success.
Yeah, he did mention off air. He's like, that Andrew McRae, he's the one that set me up.
Freedom Wallace. Yeah. None of it would have happened without. Actually, that night they called me Liam Louie.
So, did you choose your own name?
No. So Dean Malenko, for wrestling fans who may know who that is, he was the agent of the match.
Yeah.
And in the back, before we went out there, he's like, "So, what do you wrestle as, kid?" And I was like, "Freedom Wallace, sir." And he was like,
"What's that?"
Yeah. He's like, "Freedom? Yeah, okay, we'll come up with something for you." Yeah.
Liam Louie. That sounds like two individuals are probably working in the back, like, "Hey, this guy's name is Liam. He's Louie. Hey, Liam Louie, you're going out right now."
I mean, Liam's kind of like Freedom. I mean, it could be like Freedom Liam.
It's like Liam Gallagher from Oasis.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. That was my favorite band when I was
a kid. Yeah? Oh, hey, Oasis is classic. What's Story Morning Glory, man?
That's right.
Yeah, classic album. But, man, you are quite busy because not only are you a mainstay at Battle Arts Academy, shouts to Santino Morelli, Anthony Corelli, who was also a guest on New Theory Radio. So there's always a recurring theme here involving you. And you just fought Anthony recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did that go?
Well, I'd like to first off say no cobras.
Okay.
I'm upset. You got all these guys that have beat me up before. You've had them on before you had me on. Buddy Murphy. You didn't even call me to tell me that Buddy Murphy was going to be here.
I should have.
That was my chance to get back at him.
I know.
But I did just...
Next time, I'll call you, but hey, I got him. I got him.
I'm going to jump him in the parking lot. I did just fight Santino Marella or Anthony Corelli.
He went by Anthony Corelli because it's like he's back to being like a shooter now.
Well, he did go by Anthony Corelli.
Yeah.
The WWE does own the name Santino Marella.
Yes.
But he did wrestle, you could say, in the style of Santino Marella wrestling us.
Okay.
So I did get snake bitten. I fell victim to the Cobra, as did my tag team partner, Bradford Montague.
Oh, yes.
And Anthony actually brought back his former tag team partner, Vladimir Kozlov.
Yes. Who's jacked.
Oh, man. It was like fighting a Russian super soldier. I managed to avoid any serious contact with him. I sent my cousin into battle with the super soldier, but yeah. We spent a good part of the match beating up Anthony, though. It was great.
That's cool. That's good. It's cool to get one up on your coach, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like you're idols become your rivals?
He had everything that we gave him coming to him.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
yeah. He deserved it.
A little stiff action. Also, I want to reiterate, when I call him a shooter, he's not actually a shooter. Shooter is a type of term that we use for pro wrestlers that mainly use submissions, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So growing up, he was big in judo, obviously. So he's a real martial artist. And professional wrestling is the bread and butter of Battle Arts Academy, but it's also a martial arts gym. Almost all the pro wrestlers cross-train in the martial arts classes.
Because you do judo as well.
I did do a lot of judo for a long time. I've kind of stepped back a little bit because it takes a lot you have to focus your energy on what you really want to do. But yeah, I progressed to blue belt rank in judo.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Anthony loves throwing people around.
Well, I guess you loved throwing him around last week. So
it was awesome. Yeah.
That's great, man. But Battle Arts has another show coming up this weekend. It's the Rising Stars show.
Yeah, so that's
Saturday.
Saturday night, October 5th, will be Battle Arts Rising Stars. So I wrestled Anthony on the Battle Arts Pro show.
Yes.
So he's trying to elevate some of the students that are now ready to be showcased.
Awesome.
And presenting them in this professional light with his new Battle Arts Pro brand. So now there are two different types of shows. Battle Arts Pro, I believe, will be bi-monthly, and we still have our monthly Rising Stars show.
That's great, man.
Which is for the students of every level. So you'll get brand new beginners in the ring, but you'll also get the champions will wrestle on both Battle Arts Pro and Rising Stars, so you do get experienced wrestlers. It's still a worthwhile, entertaining time.
And your cousin Bradford will be on that show as well?
I don't know that Clan Freedom will have recovered from the Cobra strikes in time to be on the Rising Stars shows. It's actually quite likely that you will not see Freedom Wallace or Bradford Montague.
It was that bad, eh?
At Battle Arts for the remainder of 2019 on the Rising Stars show.
Really?
I may recover in time to resurface in 2020 and exact some vengeance upon Santino Marella once again.
Well, what I was saying earlier when I did my intro is that you have other shows that you do,
right?
In Toronto at the Junction, which isn't too far from here, actually. If you go further down Eglinton, eventually you get to the Junction. I think so.
It's a worthwhile trip.
Yeah, it definitely is, because it's Junction City Wrestling,
correct?
And what's cool about this is, because I remember you and I bumped into each other randomly during like TIFF week. I think we were both in downtown Toronto at the Senator.
We went to the Senator Diner. Did you enjoy your breakfast that day?
Of course. Did you enjoy yours? Because it was your first time.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, it was really good. You know what? I'm going to shout out my girlfriend Carly too. We were there, and you were there.
Yeah, with my wife.
With your wife.
She's fully pregnant. Yeah.
And we all enjoyed. We all enjoyed it.
It was a worthwhile meal.
We actually wound up in the booth side by side, which was hilarious.
Yeah,
because we talked out front, and we were like, "All right, man, great to see you. We'll be in touch." And then we got seated first. We sat down. We saw the open booth.
Yeah.
And then we were both like, my girlfriend and I were like, I bet you that they're going to get that seat right there. And then sure enough, they boothed you. And then we kind of awkwardly didn't interact during the meal until it was finished. And then
which is fine, because I find that during meals it can be a bit hard. But
no, totally. I didn't want to talk to you anyway.
But we did talk about, when we were both waiting for our table, we did talk about these awesome shows that you put together. You've been doing there for quite some time, right?
Yes. So the first Junction City Wrestling show was July of 2017.
Yes.
And if people do want to see me wrestle this weekend, they will be able to. So the show is on Sunday at Junction Craft Brewing, which is up in the Junction, sort of the Stockyards neighborhood.
Man.
The address is 150 Symes Road. The show starts at 2 p.m.
All right.
There's
the hard sell.
Yeah, there's tons of information on the internet. But brief history. Started by pairing up with another brewery called Shacklands Brewing Co. So I approached them in early 2017. In that brewery, there's a ton of like memorabilia, and the main guy behind the bar, Dave, he's got a shelf of everything.
Yeah.
So I had already approached a couple other places about having shows in the neighborhood. It's something I wanted to do for several years.
Totally.
So sitting there inside Shacklands one day, knowing I wanted to bring the subject up, I was looking at the shelf of everything, and I noticed a Brutus the Barber Beefcake collector cup.
Really?
So that was my segue.
That's your
to be
man.
Like, hey, I see you have a Brutus Beefcake collector cup. Have you ever thought about having a wrestling show
Boom.
in the parking lot?
There you go.
He was like, bam, let's do it. So we had 3 shows the first summer. They were all free outdoor shows in the parking lot of 2017. Then 2018, we did 2 more free shows in the parking lot. And then off the success of those 5 outdoor shows, I finally graduated out of the parking lot inside the Junction Craft
That's
Brewery.
awesome.
So this one coming up on Sunday will be the 3rd show inside the brewery.
Excellent.
We've also had 1 show in a venue called 3030, which is at Dundas and High Park, right in the middle of the Junction.
That's actually close to where I currently live.
Right
awesome.
smack dab in the middle. And we did do another free outdoor show this year as well.
Excellent.
And there's a pocket of 3 breweries there. So there's Shacklands, Reinhard, and Junction Craft.
Yeah.
And this year was the first year I managed to get all 3 of the breweries to work together
That's
to
awesome.
co-present the show with me.
Yeah.
And then they all serve outside, and the shows are totally family friendly, geared towards kids, really.
Yeah.
But also like dads that maybe now they have like a 5-year-old and they used to love wrestling in 1988.
Yeah.
So it's right up their alley. But also I want to appeal to people that aren't necessarily wrestling fans. Like I want everyday people to just be able to come out, enjoy the show, and just have an entertaining experience, occupy their kids, and of course drink the delicious local craft beer.
Well, I was gonna say,
Junction
like,
Craft Brewing.
Like beer's a great entryway for that.
That's I'm really just selling beer. I'm like selling beer and a fun experience, and then I get in the ring and I basically trick people into coming to a wrestling show.
Man, whatever.
And then show up with my cousin in our kilts, and they're like, "What am I watching?
What's
this is
going on?
great. Yeah,
Keep drinking.
yeah, it doesn't matter what we're watching."
But that was the basis of the conversation that you and I were having at the Senator outside while we're waiting to get seated. I've been noticing this like interesting movement around local wrestling shows. Like obviously there's your local independents that take place at community centers, and in your case with Battle Arts, at the actual gyms where people train. But you're starting to see wrestling pop up at like interesting venues. Like I know in Vaughan, the guys at Destiny have done like the Pizza Fests, and then I was also at the Taste of Italy, and there was like a wrestling show taking place. Like Super Kick Live has done shows like during Ozfest, like on Ossington, which is like super hipster. Like you're starting to see like these wrestling rings pop up and these wrestling shows taking place at places like at breweries and festivals. And what I love about it is there's always a crowd. Like there's always people interested, because that to me is, like, if anything, is helping wrestling become even more enticing for people, because it's almost like, to your point, like there's probably fans that haven't seen it in a very long time that all of a sudden if they're walking by a professional wrestling ring and they're seeing 2 guys go at it, they're like, wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, and there's pro wrestling's a lot like film in many ways. But I often say it's a lot like film because there's all kinds of different genres and a whole bunch of different audiences.
Yeah,
and there's a wrestling show out there for everybody.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people are deep down.
100%.
Sort of.
Oh, yeah.
Hate to admit it or won't say it out loud.
Like,
a lot of people love wrestling.
I was a big fan, and then I got out of it because my friends thought it was weird.
Yeah.
I want to get back into it.
Well, that's another thing. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, even last night somebody was like, oh, so you do the phony stuff. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm a phony.
Oh, you're that guy. You're the guy that pretends, right?
But, I think pro wrestling's had a bad rep for a long time. And I feel if some of the more rigid, old school minded professional wrestling people would be more open to admitting, like, it's obviously not a secret that wrestling is performance art. It's theater. It's entertainment.
It is, totally.
But I feel like that needs to be a more accepted view for everybody, and just be like, this is entertainment. This is a performance. Yeah, everybody trains like athletes. We are all athletes. It is exceptionally dangerous. It takes a toll on your body, absolutely. But at the end of the day, our goal is to elicit the biggest response from the audience. It's not to actually beat up your opponent, really. Ultimately, we don't want to hurt each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the last thing we want. We want to get in, get out, and don't get hurt.
It's sort of becoming hipster again, like, or it's sort of becoming hipster in general. Like, I find that it's like counterculture to be a pro wrestling fan, especially now. And one of the things I did want to pick your brain about is not only do you have big shows taking place this weekend, but this week in general in pro wrestling is huge with the fact that AEW, All Elite Wrestling, starting on Wednesday, and there's NXT, which is now airing live each and every Wednesday, which is great news for someone like yourself who's trying to crack into the system. But those promotions, like the fan base of that is like people that are, I would say for the most part, are like diehard fans, but they're almost like your indie rock fans. Like they're very much, as much as some of those athletes could be geared towards children, it's a very mid-older, like older millennial crowd that's attending these types of shows that are becoming more and more passionate about pro wrestling and treating it like you're, seeing like your favorite indie band and supporting them. Like, do you find that, especially with these brewery shows, that you're getting a very distinct audience coming out outside of the kids that you're obviously appealing to that are very much into the counterculture aspect of it?
I don't think we're particularly getting the typical wrestling audience.
Yeah.
We do get some of the typical wrestling audience, but I'd say Junction City Wrestling is an atypical wrestling audience.
Yeah.
Because we're getting like moms, and especially for the free parking lot shows where you can hear the commotion for miles around.
I bet.
And families will just come wandering up.
Yeah.
And we got like dogs and grandmas and like 3-year-olds and 90-year-olds and people of all walks of life.
Yeah.
The brewery shows are a mix, so you'll get both the typical audience and the atypical audience.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying in terms of the demographic that is into NXT and AEW. It is a lot like the indie rock audience.
It is.
And
it's becoming cool to be a fan of this thing. Like even like New Japan. Like it's almost, if you are a fan of these promotions that aren't necessarily the mainstream WWE that's on Monday and now Fridays, it's almost cool to admit that.
Yeah.
Like I find that my brother, who's my photographer, like he calls himself an NXT fan because I think he's somewhat embarrassed to be a Raw and SmackDown fan. But
so I was going to make that point as well. I feel like the WWE over time, it's a combination of them alienating some of their fan base with their repetitive product, and it's just too easy to know what's going to happen, and it's always disappointing.
Yeah.
And also, there's that element too of like, well, I don't like these shows anymore. But also there's a element of like people just not growing up.
I know, that's true
so
too.
So there's like, I'm sorry, wrestling fans, but there's a lot of grown man children that just.
Hey, I was just at SummerSlam weekend. I saw a lot of that. I might have been one of those guys. Who knows?
Yeah, they're just like, no, I didn't want Bill Goldberg to wrestle. I didn't want him to win like that. But I can remember even, the way I watch wrestling is way different now.
Yeah.
I mean, I hardly do. I should probably be watching more wrestling.
Well, because you're in the industry, so you're obviously watching it for different things, right?
If I watch Junction City Wrestling more than any other program, which you can, of course, check out on our YouTube channel.
Oh, nice.
Please
Excellent.
go and subscribe. We are in our 3rd season of Junction City Wrestling.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
This Sunday, we will film the season finale of Season 3. We are staging a wedding. There may be a flying saucer that crashes into the brewery. There may or may not be a wrestler that arrives in the flying saucer.
Wow, really?
A lot's going to happen.
Wrestling weddings are the best weddings.
Oh, yeah. And you know that obviously nothing will go wrong and everything will be perfectly fine.
Wrestling weddings are the most. If you're going to have any type of wedding, you want to have a wrestling wedding.
Yeah. I actually, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but I own the web domain wrestlingweddings.com.
Do you actually?
And maybe somebody listening out there is interested, but I know there's a market out there for people that want to get married in a ring. Plus there's like the double entendre, like ring, wrestling ring, diamond ring, so on and so forth.
Wow.
You could have the referee.
Andrew, you're quite the sales guy, man.
You could have the referee officiating the wedding. Does anyone object to these two being wed? Of course, here comes the villain. And there's a market for like bachelor parties. Like,
That's
do
awesome,
the guys want to like learn how to body slam each other the week before the wedding, or like spend an hour in the ring?
Yeah.
And,
but kudos to you for thinking about these things differently, because the way you're kind of describing some of these ventures is definitely somewhat appealing to sort of the generation of now. Like, it's almost like these unique experiences that people are experiencing that want one of a kind times of their lives versus, it's like when you ask someone, hey, I want to go to a pro wrestling show, it's like, yeah. I'm actually being told that we're running out of time, Andrew, but I do want to give you like a minute to promote again what you're doing this weekend, and where can people reach out to you?
So they can find me specifically online at the handle at Freedom is McRae.
Nice.
So Andrew McRae. I'm also, of course, Freedom Wallace. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Freedom Wallace. I'm there. And then Junction City Wrestling. They can go to junctioncitywrestling.com. Right now that just leads to the ticket sale page for this Sunday's Oktoberfest event, which is,
love the name,
once again inside the Junction Craft Brewery at 150 Symes Road in Toronto. The show starts at 2 p.m. Tickets are $20, and if you're listening now and you do go online, you can enter the code Diamond Ring at checkout and save 20% off of your tickets to the show. And then they can also follow Junction City Wrestling on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestle Junction, and of course on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch every single episode that's ever been posted of Junction City Wrestling and get up to date with the goings on.
Nice. I told you, you're really good at maximizing your minutes.
Thank you. Did I hit the minute?
You did. That's Andrew McRae, Freedom Wallace, and also definitely check out Battle Arts Rising Stars on the Saturday as well.
Oh yeah, Battle Arts Academy, Santino Morello, they're great. None of this would be possible without him, of course.
I'll include that information as well in the podcast description. And this actually concludes this week's episode of New Theory Radio, but if you want to connect with me, it's at Nanwa on Twitter, at Nav Nanwa on Instagram. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, this episode will repeat tomorrow, Monday at 8 p.m., and we'll also be online on Spotify and iTunes but tomorrow morning. Thanks again, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.
At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.